The Red Sea looked calm that night. No storms. No clouds. Just open sky and quiet water stretching endlessly below. High above it all, a US Air Force F-16 sliced through the darkness on what should have been a routine patrol. Steady altitude. Normal speed. No reason to expect trouble. The kind of mission pilots almost run on muscle memory. Then everything changed. A sharp tone pierced the cockpit. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just deadly. A warning symbol flashed across the pilot's display. Radar lock. He didn't hesitate. Training kicked in before fear could even form. His eyes scanned the instruments. The signal wasn't friendly. It wasn't accidental. Someone had painted him. Seconds later, another alert stacked on top of the first. Then a third. Missile launch. Brake, brake, brake. The F-16 rolled hard, slicing through the air as countermeasures fired from its wings. Bright flares exploded behind the jet like artificial suns, trying to confuse a weapon that had already chosen its prey. Down below, in territory controlled by Houthi forces, a surface-to-air missile had just been fired. Fast. Silent. Guided by heat. Built for one purpose only. Kill the aircraft. The missile adjusted mid-flight, correcting its path as the fighter ducked. The distance between hunter and target collapsed rapidly. 30 seconds. That's all the pilot had. He pulled into a brutal turn, forcing the jet to its physical limits. The aircraft groaned under the strain. Blood rushed from his vision. The engine screamed. Somewhere far out at sea, radar operators were already watching this unfold live. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't random. And the missile wasn't the real threat. Because the moment it launched, a much bigger clock started ticking. The missile closed in fast. Its seeker burned through the night, locked onto the white-hot exhaust of the F-16 like a predator refusing to blink. Every correction it made pulled it closer, tighter, deadlier. Inside the cockpit, the pilot felt the G-forces crush his body into the seat. 9 Gs. The kind that turn vision into a narrow tunnel and breathing into work. He fought it anyway. There was no other option. Another burst of flares dropped away from the jet. For a split second, the missile hesitated. That moment saved his life. The seeker snapped toward the hotter decoy, overcorrected, and detonated in open air, far enough away to spare the aircraft, close enough to shake the cockpit like a thunderclap. Silence followed. The F-16 survived. But survival didn't mean safety. Because the sky didn't relax after the explosion. It tightened. The pilot steadied the jet, pulling back to altitude, heart still hammering. He checked his instruments, ready to call it in when his radar warning receiver screamed again. New signal. Different angle. Multiple sources. This wasn't a single reckless shot anymore. It was a network. Below him, radar systems along the Yemeni coast came alive, older designs, upgraded, mobile, dangerous. Cold War technology rebuilt with modern guidance. Slow to move. Easy to track. And now, fully exposed. The cockpit filled with warning tones as locks stacked one after another. The system identified them instantly. SA-6 class threats. Plural. Viper 3, defensive, the pilot called out, voice calm but tight. Multiple locks. Request support. He pushed the throttles forward. Afterburners ignited, turning fuel into raw thrust. The jet surged ahead, but the locks stayed with him, clinging like shadows. What the radar crews on the ground didn't realize was this. Every second they stayed active, every pulse they transmitted, every attempt to guide a missile was being recorded. Not just by the F-16, but by eyes far beyond their reach. High above the battlefield. The second missile didn't come alone. Warning tones layered over each other in the cockpit, sharp and urgent. The F-16's threat display bloomed with symbols, each one representing a system on the ground trying to kill him. Locks. Search radars. Tracking pulses. The pilot stayed low and fast, rolling the jet into another violent maneuver. Flares burst behind him in timed waves, not random, calculated. Every movement had purpose. Then the air changed. Across the spectrum, hostile radar signals began to stutter. Some vanished completely. Others flickered like dying lights. Electronic warfare had arrived. Out over the Red Sea, an EA-18G Growler had gone to work. Its jamming pods poured energy into the sky, flooding enemy sensors with noise, false targets, and broken data. To the radar operators on the ground, the world suddenly stopped making sense. Targets split into ghosts. Distances lied. Guidance failed. The window was small, but it was enough. The F-16 dove again, pushing speed past the edge of comfort. A missile streaked past his left wing, close enough to rattle the canopy, then missed entirely. That was the last clean shot they'd get. Because while the pilot fought for his life, something much higher was calmly collecting evidence. Nearly 60,000 feet above, a Navy MQ-4C Triton traced wide circles through the night. No weapons. No sound. Just sensors, thermal, electronic, optical, recording everything. Radar pulses on the coast. Heat blooms from launch rails. Exact timing. Exact locations. Every mistake was being logged. Those signals flowed instantly through satellites, across secure networks, and into a combat information center floating miles away at sea. Inside that ship, the tone was different. No shouting. No panic. Just clean voices calling out data. Launch source confirmed. Emitter fixed. Target stable. The pilot didn't know it yet, but his fight was almost over. Not because the danger had passed, but because the response had already begun. By the time the F-16 pulled back toward safer airspace, the decision had already been made. The pilot heard it in his headset: short, controlled, final. Engagement confirmed. Maintain position. That wasn't a suggestion. It was a pause before impact. Far out in the Red Sea, inside the steel walls of a U.S. aircraft carrier's combat information center, screens glowed with layered maps and live feeds. Missile trajectories replayed in clean lines. Radar pulses froze into coordinates. Thermal spikes marked exact launch points. Nothing was guessed. Everything was locked. This was the moment the posture changed. For weeks, the rules had been restrained. Track. Monitor. Warn. Absorb. But tonight, the line had been crossed openly. A manned fighter had been targeted. That flipped the switch. Package authorized. No dramatic speeches followed. Just motion. Nearby, a guided missile destroyer adjusted its course. Deep below its deck, vertical launch cells began their mechanical sequence. Heavy steel doors slid open, exposing missiles that had been waiting silently for orders. They didn't rush. They never do. Target data flowed in launcher site, radar vehicle, command node. Each one verified by multiple sensors, each one stamped with confidence. 5 minutes. That's all it took. The F-16 pilot held his pattern, fuel steady, breathing finally slowing. Another friendly jet slid into formation beside him, scanning the darkness below. Then, on the horizon, something impossible to miss. Thin streaks of light climbed into the night sky. One. Then another. Then more. Cruise missiles. Silent after launch, curving eastward, disappearing as quickly as they appeared. The pilot didn't cheer. He didn't speak. He just watched, knowing that whatever had fired at him was now racing against time and losing. Because once those missiles were airborne, there was no calling them back. And this was only the first layer. The cruise missiles were already on their way when the second phase came alive. 70 miles away, the deck of another carrier transformed in minutes. Red lights washed over the flight line as crews moved with practiced speed. Weapons were lifted. Fuel lines connected. Jets rolled forward like restrained animals sensing release. This wasn't reaction. It was choreography. An E-2D Hawkeye lifted first, climbing into the darkness, its radar dish spinning as it began stitching together a live picture of the battle space. Every aircraft, every signal, every movement on the coast. Moments later, two EA-18G Growlers launched in sequence. Their mission was simple: blind everything. Radios, radars, command links. If it emitted energy, they would drown it. Then came the strike aircraft. 4 F-A-18 Super Hornets taxied into position, heavy with precision weapons. Smart bombs. Anti-radiation missiles. Tools designed not for warning but for removal. High above them all, the Triton drone never stopped circling. It watched vehicles scatter. Heat sources shift. Last-second attempts to hide were flagged instantly and fed forward to the strike package. On the coast, the first impact hit. A cruise missile tore into the primary launcher site, vaporizing the platform and turning stored fuel and munitions into secondary fireballs. Thermal sensors lit up bright and stayed that way. Minutes later, another target disappeared. A radar truck, still transmitting, was erased in a flash, its final emission enough to guide destruction straight to it. By the time the Super Hornets crossed the shoreline, there was no warning left to give. The Growlers filled the air with noise. To anyone on the ground, systems went dark. Screens froze. Comms collapsed. And then the bombs fell. From high altitude, silent and precise, they struck one by one. Each impact clean. Each target confirmed. The coast burned quietly. Back in the sky, the original F-16 pilot listened to the confirmations roll in. Target neutral. By the time the last bomb struck, the coast had gone quiet. Not peaceful, dead. Smoke rose in thick columns, drifting inland as heat signatures pulsed and slowly faded. Ammunition cooked off in distant pops, each one a reminder that something hidden had just been found. Above it all, the Growlers stayed on station. They didn't leave when the explosions stopped. They stayed to make sure nothing talked. Every known frequency was smothered. Any attempt to bring a radar back online was met with instant noise. False targets bloomed across dead screens, phantom fleets where nothing existed, chaos where order had once lived. For the first time that night, the Houthis were blind. The Triton drone tracked movement, vehicles abandoning positions, Personnel scattering into terrain, heat trails disappearing into caves and cover. None of it mattered now. The offensive systems were gone. Launchers destroyed. Radars erased. Command nodes buried. Back at sea, the carriers shifted posture again. Combat air patrols replaced strike packages. Fresh jets rotated into the sky, weapons loaded, fuel topped off, ready to respond if anything else dared to wake up. Nothing did. The F-16 pilot received the final call. Viper 3, threat eliminated. Return to base. He turned west, the jet humming steadily beneath him. The adrenaline finally drained away, leaving only focus and fatigue. Below, the Red Sea reflected the night sky like nothing had happened. But everything had changed. On the coast, operators who survived would remember this moment. The moment pressing a button didn't just launch a missile, it summoned consequences. And those consequences didn't argue. They arrived. By morning, there were no press conferences. No dramatic statements. No victory banners. Just silence and satellite images. Analysts around the world began noticing the gaps. Familiar radar sites gone dark. Launch areas scorched. Support vehicles missing. Patterns broken overnight. Military observers didn't need explanations. They understood the message. This wasn't retaliation fueled by emotion. It was enforcement. A reminder written in precision, steel, and electromagnetic dominance. For the Houthis, the loss wasn't just hardware. It was confidence. The belief that they could fire, hide, and repeat had evaporated in a single night. Every operator now faced a question before powering up a system. Will this signal be my last? And beyond Yemen, others were watching closely. Regional powers. Global rivals. Strategic planners who track how quickly a military can detect, decide, and destroy. They saw a timeline measured in minutes, not hours. Detect. Fix. Strike. Confirm. No hesitation. Back aboard the carrier, life returned to rhythm. Jets were inspected. Decks were cleared. Crews reset for the next watch. To them, this wasn't history, it was procedure executed correctly. The F-16 pilot logged the mission, said little, and moved on. There was no celebration for surviving. That's part of the job. But the lesson remained in the air long after the smoke faded. In modern warfare, firing first doesn't mean winning. Sometimes it just means being found. That night never made the headlines the way wars usually do. No official names. No declared battles. Just a brief mention buried in reports and timelines. But those who understood modern warfare knew exactly what had happened. A single missile launch had revealed an entire network. Sensors talked to satellites. Satellites talked to ships. Ships talked to aircraft. And within minutes, a battlefield had been rewritten. This is what power looks like now, not mass formations or endless dogfights, but speed, integration, and certainty. The ability to turn one mistake into total exposure. The Houthis didn't just lose equipment that night. They lost initiative. They lost unpredictability. And in war, that loss echoes. Every radar operator along that coast will hesitate now. Every commander will wonder how much is being watched. Because the real weapon wasn't the missile or the bomb. It was awareness. The understanding that nothing happens in isolation anymore. One launch triggers a chain reaction, that doesn't stop until the threat is erased at every level. The F-16 flew home untouched. The sea returned to silence. But the equation had changed. One missile can start a confrontation. But a failed one can end an entire strategy. And somewhere out there, someone is still staring at a dark radar screen, realizing too late that pressing a button was never the dangerous part. Being seen was.